She laughed at his shoes, not loudly, not cruelly, or not with the intention of cruelty, which is a distinction that matters to the person doing the laughing and means nothing at all to the person being laughed at. She laughed the way people laugh when something catches them off guard and the social filter doesn't engage in time. A short sound. A quick turn to the woman beside her. A comment spoken at a volume calibrated for one person that carried, in the specific acoustics of a marble lobby, to several more. He heard it. He did not look up. He bent down, retied the lace on his left shoe, the one where the sole had separated at the toe, the one he'd been meaning to replace for 6 weeks, stood back up, picked up his son's backpack from the bench beside him, and walked to the elevator. He said nothing. He would not say anything for a very long time. But the lobby was about to teach her something about the man with the torn shoes that no filter in the world would have helped her manage. His name was on the wall. The building was the Hendricks Center for Children's Medicine, a $47 million facility on the north side of Indianapolis. 4 floors of pediatric specialty care, built in 2019, opened without fanfare in the middle of a year when the world had other things on its mind. It was not the largest children's medical facility in the state. It was, by the assessment of every physician and nurse who worked in it, the best designed one. The lobby was something. Not ostentatious. It was a children's hospital, and children's hospitals know that a lobby has to do 2 things simultaneously: reassure the parents and calm the children. The Hendricks lobby did both. High ceilings, natural light from a south-facing wall of windows, a floor mosaic in warm colors that managed to be beautiful without being loud. A mural on the east wall, painted by local artists, of children in various states of becoming, running, reading, looking at the sky. The donor wall was on the north side. Brushed steel, floor-to-ceiling, names in clean sans serif type. Tiered by giving level. 412 names. She had walked past it every day for 2 years. She had never read it all the way through. Her name was Dr. Patricia Wren, 47 years old, CEO of the Hendricks Center for the past 2 years. Following a career that had moved from pediatric medicine to hospital administration in her late 30s, driven by the specific frustration of a clinician who had decided that the most important thing she could do for children's health was fix the systems that delivered it, rather than treating patients one at a time. She was good at the job. Sharp, efficient, politically skilled in the way that running a nonprofit medical institution required, able to manage a board, cultivate donors, navigate the specific friction between clinical and administrative priorities, and do all of it while maintaining the forward momentum of a facility that existed at bottom to help sick children get better. She had, in 2 years, raised the facility's annual operating budget by 22%, recruited 4 nationally recognized specialists, and overseen the completion of the new oncology wing that was opening in 3 months. She was also, as she would later say, not publicly, but to the person who mattered, capable of a particular kind of thoughtlessness that had nothing to do with malice and everything to do with speed. She moved fast. She made quick assessments. She had developed, in the machinery of a career that rewarded efficiency, a habit of reading people rapidly and acting on the reading. On a Thursday morning in November, she had read a man in a torn shoe and acted on the reading. She had been wrong. His name was David Marsh, 51 years old. Medium height, lean in the way of someone who moved a lot rather than someone who worked out. Brown hair going gray at the temples. The kind of face that settled naturally into quiet. Not sadness. Not distance. Just a baseline stillness that suggested a man comfortable in his own company. He was wearing dark pants, a checked flannel shirt, and a pair of work boots that had, on the left one, a sole separation at the toe. The visible gap of a seam that had given up after several years of daily use. He was sitting on the bench in the lobby with a 7-year-old boy beside him. The boy's name was Sam. Sam had brown hair that was currently attempting 3 directions at once. He was wearing a dinosaur backpack and looking at the lobby mural with the specific intensity of a child who takes pictures of things he likes, but doesn't have a camera. "Dad," Sam said. "Yes, the T-Rex in the mural has the wrong arms." David looked at the mural. "How so?" "The arms are too long." T-Rex arms were really short, like embarrassingly short. Maybe the artist didn't know that. Someone should tell them, Sam said, with the earnest conviction of a 7-year-old who has not yet learned to leave incorrect things alone. We can leave a note, David said. Sam considered this seriously. Okay, he said, but nicely, because they did a good job on the rest of it. David smiled. He reached down to retie the left boot. The lace had come loose during the walk from the parking garage, and the sole separation made the lace tension uneven, a problem he'd been compensating for by tying the left one tighter. He was mid-kneel when he heard it. 2 women crossing the lobby behind him. One of them was in a suit, dark gray, well cut. The kind of suit that announces itself without trying. The other was in medical whites. The laugh. Short, not unkind in intention. The quick comment to the woman beside her. He heard the words, interview? In those? Not all of it. He didn't need all of it. He finished tying the boot. He stood up. He picked up Sam's backpack. He looked at the mural for a moment, the T-Rex with the 2 long arms. Come on, bud, he said. They walked to the elevator. Sam Marsh had a condition called juvenile idiopathic arthritis. Not the kind of arthritis most people know, the slow, grinding kind that comes with age. The kind that arrives in children for reasons that immunology is still working to fully explain, that inflames the joints in a child's growing body, that can, without proper management, affect not just mobility, but vision, development, the whole architecture of a life that is only just being built. Sam had been diagnosed at 5. He was a patient of Dr. Kira Okafor, the Hendrick Center's head of pediatric rheumatology, a specialist of national reputation who had come to Indianapolis 2 years ago because the facility was right and the program was right, and, though she would not have said this in a grant application, because the building itself had something in it that she recognized as serious. Sam came to the Hendrick Center every 8 weeks. It was, for a 7-year-old, a large part of his calendar. He had made his peace with it in the way that children make peace with things that cannot be changed, by finding the parts that were interesting. The mural in the lobby, the fish tank on floor 2, Dr. Okafor, who kept a jar of small dinosaur figurines on her desk and let Sam take one home each visit, an arrangement that had produced, over 18 months, a small army of plastic prehistoric creatures arranged on the windowsill of Sam's bedroom. He did not complain about coming. He asked each time what dinosaur he'd get to take home. He was, in this as in most things, his father's son. What Patricia Wren had seen in the 3-second assessment she'd made in the lobby was this: a man in work clothes with a broken shoe, sitting on the bench where family members of patients usually sat, accompanied by a small child. Waiting for an appointment. Not a donor, not a physician, not a board member, not someone she needed to know. She had been wrong about all of it, in ways she would not understand for another 6 days. David Marsh was, by occupation, a general contractor. Sole proprietor. 4 employees, sometimes 5. Licensed in Indiana, Ohio, and Kentucky. Specialized in commercial renovation, older buildings, historic properties, the kind of work that required understanding structures that had been built before modern codes and adapting them with care. He was good at the work. He was not famous for it. He was known, in the circles where these things were known, for finishing on time, for not cutting corners, and for a quality of attention to older structures that his clients described, when they described it at all, as rare. He had grown up in Anderson, Indiana. His father had been a carpenter. His mother had worked as a school librarian until the school district's budget cuts had made the position disappear, which was a loss that had shaped his understanding of how institutions failed people more than he'd been able to articulate until he was in his 40s. He had one son. He had a pair of boots with a separated sole that he'd been planning to replace and kept not replacing, because October and November were busy months and the boots still worked, and there were 12 other things on the list. He had a name on the donor wall of the Hendrick Center for Children's Medicine. Level, founding benefactor. The highest tier. The Hendrick Center had been in development for 6 years before it opened. The capital campaign, raising $47 million for construction, endowment, and program funding, had taken 4 of those years. It had been, by any measure, an extraordinary effort. The development team had cultivated hundreds of donors, organized dozens of events, made thousands of asks. The largest single gift in the campaign had come from an anonymous donor, $3.2 million. The largest individual gift in the facility's history. Larger than any corporate gift. Larger than any foundation grant. The gift had been designated for three things: the pediatric rheumatology program, the facility's family support services, and a scholarship fund for children from low-income families who needed long-term specialty care and couldn't afford the ancillary costs, the travel, the lodging, the time off work that a parent had to take for each appointment. The anonymous donor had, when the development director had tried to negotiate a naming opportunity, a wing, a clinic, a fellowship, declined, put it in the wall. The donor had said, just the name. The name on the donor wall, in the top tier, in the same clean sans serif as the 411 names around it, was David A. Marsh, in memory of Eleanor Marsh. Eleanor had been Sam's mother. She had died of ovarian cancer in 2021 when Sam was 4. The rheumatology program that was keeping her son's joints healthy enough for him to run and argue about T-Rex arms and build a collection of plastic dinosaurs, that program existed, in part, because David Marsh had given the largest gift in the building's history to the place that was taking care of what Eleanor had left behind. Patricia Wren did not know any of this. She was about to. He had not told anyone at the center. Not when he made the gift. Not when the building opened. Not in the 2 years since Sam had become a patient. Not once in 18 months of appointments had he mentioned it to Dr. Okafor or to the check-in staff on floor 3 or to any of the other families he'd sat beside in the waiting room and talked to in the easy, unguarded way of people who were all there for the same hard reason. He was David, Sam's dad. That was enough. The development director had known, of course, and the CFO and the board chair who had called him personally, twice, to ask if he was certain about the anonymity. He was certain. Put it in the wall, he'd said. Just the name. Eleanor's name. Not his. Her name had been Eleanor Cahill Marsh. She and David had met in 2009 at a renovation project in Broad Ripple, a 1920s commercial building that David was converting to mixed use, and where Eleanor had been one of 3 artists commissioned to design the lobby installation. He had noticed her first because of her laugh. Not the content of it. He hadn't heard what she was laughing at. He'd been on the 2nd floor when the sound came up from the lobby. He'd noticed the laugh because it was the kind you move toward. Open, unself-conscious, the laugh of someone who found things genuinely funny rather than performing the finding. He had found a reason to go down to the lobby. She was standing in the center of the space. Measuring the north wall with a tape measure that was too short for the job, it kept catching, and she kept moving, and the numbers clearly weren't adding up the way she needed them to. She'd been talking to herself about it in the way of people who solve problems out loud when they don't know anyone is watching. He had picked up the other end of the tape. That side's 43 feet, he said. She had looked at him. How do you know? I built it. She had looked at the wall, then back at him. Then why did it take me 4 tries to measure it? Because the tape you have is 30 feet, he said. You need at least 45. She had looked at the tape. I have a 45-foot tape in the truck, he said, if you want it. She had smiled. Do you always lend your tools to people you've just met? Only when they need them, he said. They had gone for dinner that night. They had been married in 2013. Sam had been born in 2017. The diagnosis had come in 2019, hers first, and then his, and then, 18 months later, Sam's. The 3 of them managing 2 different kinds of bad news simultaneously, with the specific solidarity of a small family that has decided, without any formal discussion. That solidarity is the only option. Eleanor had died in February of 2021. She was 41 years old. She had, in her last 6 months, been as afraid for Sam as she had been about anything. Not the fact of his condition, which was manageable, but the question of whether the right kind of care would be accessible to him over the years of his childhood. Whether the programs that were doing the most good for kids like him would still be there, properly funded, properly staffed. David had made a promise. He had kept it. The Hendricks Center Capital campaign had been in its final year when Eleanor died. David had known about the campaign. Eleanor had been following it. She had read every piece of the development materials, had attended a public information session, had said, with the specific certainty of someone who understood what a building was built for, that this was the kind of facility that could make a difference for Sam. She had not lived to see it open. David had made the gift 6 months after she died. Not impulsively, he was not an impulsive man. He had thought about it carefully. He had had conversations with his accountant, with his attorney, with his own sense of what Eleanor would have wanted, and whether honoring that want was the right decision or a grief-driven one. He had concluded it was both. The $3.2 million had come from 2 sources. The first was a sale. He had owned a commercial property in Fountain Square, a building he'd renovated in 2014 and held as an investment. He had sold it in 2021. The proceeds were significant. The second was savings. 15 years of careful income management from the contracting business, the specific discipline of a man who had learned from his father that you built for the long term, that the long term required capital. And that capital required the daily decision not to spend what you'd earned before you understood what it was for. He had understood, after Eleanor died, what it was for. The gift had been made in Eleanor's name. Not David Marsh Construction. Not the Marsh Family Fund. Not anything that announced a business or a brand. Just David A. Marsh, in memory of Eleanor Marsh. He had asked once, during the gift conversation with the development director, how the rheumatology program would use the funding. The development director had explained it in detail. David had listened. He had nodded once. Good, he said. He had not asked anything else. This is the part of the story that requires the most honesty, because it is the most ordinary part. David Marsh wore the torn boots to the Hendricks Center on that Thursday morning in November, because they were his work boots, and he had a job site to visit after Sam's appointment, and changing shoes between the appointment and the job site would have required going home first, which would have added 45 minutes to a morning that was already compressed. There was no statement in the boots. There was no performance of humility or deliberate anonymity or message being sent to anyone. He had worn them because they were practical, and he was a practical man, and the sole had separated at the toe, but they were still boots. He had been meaning to replace them for 6 weeks. The 6 weeks had contained, among other things, a roof replacement in Irvington that ran 3 days over schedule due to weather, Sam's school parent-teacher conference, a plumbing emergency at a client's building in Carmel, 2 rounds of Sam's physical therapy, a board meeting for the neighborhood association he'd been on since 2018, and the regular apparatus of being the only parent in a small household, which is a full-time occupation on top of every other full-time occupation. The boots had remained unresolved. This is not a metaphor. It is just what happens when you are the only adult in a house, and there are 12 things on the list, and the boots still work. Dr. Kira Okafor had been treating Sam Marsh for 18 months. She was 43. Originally from Lagos, completed her training in London and then at Johns Hopkins, recruited to the Hendricks Center, in part because the rheumatology program was funded well enough to make the offer serious. She was one of the best pediatric rheumatologists in the country. She was also, in the specific way of the very best clinicians, a person who paid attention to more than the chart. She had noticed, early in Sam's treatment, that his father was different from the average medical appointment parent. Not in any dramatic way. In small ways. He never looked at his phone during the consultation. He asked questions that showed he'd read the materials she'd sent, not just skim them, read them, the way you read something when the reading matters. He noticed when she was tired. He thanked the check-in staff by name. He was, she had concluded by month 3, a man of genuine attention. She had also noticed the boots. Not with derision, she had grown up with enough to understand that worn things were not evidence of character deficiency. She had noticed them with the peripheral awareness of a woman who sees everything in a room and processes most of it in the background. She had never asked about them. She had her suspicions about David Marsh, fragments, not a full picture. The way he talked about the building sometimes. A comment he'd made once, offhand, about the rheumatology program's funding being what it should be. The specific quality of investment he had in this particular facility over the many facilities they might have used. She had not pursued the suspicions. Her job was Sam's joints. The rest was his to hold. 6 days after the lobby moment, Patricia Wren's development director came to her office. His name was Calvin Bright, 42 years old. Had been with the center since the Capitol campaign, had done more than any single person to get it built, knew the donor list the way some people know scripture. Not just the names, but the stories behind them. He closed the door. She looked up from her laptop. His expression was the one he wore when he had something difficult to say, which was an expression she recognized and did not enjoy. "I need to tell you something about the lobby," he said. She put down her pen. Calvin had been in the lobby 6 days ago. Not when it happened, he'd been at his desk. But the receptionist, Denise, had mentioned it. Quietly, later that day, in the way that staff mention things they witnessed that they're not sure how to process. "Doctor, Wren said something in the lobby this morning," Denise had said, "about a patient family. The man with the little boy with the dinosaur backpack." Calvin had not thought much of it until later that afternoon, when he'd been reviewing the annual donor acknowledgement list and had come to the name for the 4th time that year, and had thought, as he always did, about the conversation he'd had with David Marsh in 2021. And something had connected. He had pulled the patient records. He had not read them, he had no right to read them, and he hadn't. He had confirmed only what he was permitted to confirm, that a patient by the name of Sam Marsh had regular appointments at the center. He had sat with that for 6 days. He was sitting with it now, across from Patricia Wren, who was looking at him with the expression of someone who already understood that she was not going to like what came next. "The man in the lobby," Calvin said, "with the little boy." "I don't. You made a comment about his shoes." A pause. "I said something to Jennifer. I didn't realize Denise heard it," Calvin said. "So did at least one other person in the lobby." Patricia was quiet. "I'm not here to make you feel worse than you already do," Calvin said. "I'm here because you need to know who he is." He slid a single sheet across her desk. She looked at it. It was a donor acknowledgement summary. Name, date, amount, designation, David A. Marsh in memory of Eleanor Marsh. $3.2 million. Rheumatology program, family support services, Access Scholarship Fund. Anonymous, donor requested name on wall only. She read it twice. She looked up. "He's Sam's father," Calvin said. "Sam is his son. He's been bringing him here for 18 months. Patricia looked at the sheet. She looked at the wall through her office window, the donor wall, the north side of the lobby, the brushed steel, the 412 names. She was very still. "He never," she started. "Never mentioned it," Calvin said. "Not to Dr. Okafor, not to the front desk, not to anyone, as far as I can tell." "The boots," she said. "He's a contractor," Calvin said. "He had a job site after the appointment." She closed her eyes. She opened them. "What do I do?" she said. Calvin looked at her for a moment. "I think," he said, "that's the right question." In part 3, what she does. The conversation she almost doesn't have the courage to have. What David says that she doesn't expect. And the thing Sam does that changes the tone of everything. She stood in front of the donor wall for 40 minutes. Not all at once. In intervals, over the course of the afternoon after Calvin left her office. She would go back to her desk, work for 20 minutes, and then find herself standing in front of the wall again. She had walked past it every day for 2 years. She had never read it all the way through. She read it now. All 412 names. She read them the way you read a thing when you are trying to understand what you've been not seeing, which is a different kind of reading, slower, more honest, more willing to let the weight of it land. She stopped when she got to the top tier. David A. Marsh, in memory of Eleanor Marsh. She stood there for a long time. She thought about the lobby, the quick assessment, the comment to Jennifer, the ease of it, how effortless it had been to look at a man and see only what was broken, and to say so. She thought about a man who had given $3.2 million to keep a promise to a dead woman and had never told anyone. She went back to her office and started drafting an email. She deleted it. She started again. She deleted that one too. She picked up the phone. She had 3 options. She had, in the first hour after Calvin left, laid them out the way she laid out any decision, clearly, without sentiment, with the specific unsentimental efficiency that had served her well in administration. Option 1. Write a letter. Formal, considered, giving him the space to receive it without having to perform a response in real time. Option 2. Reach out through Calvin, who had the relationship, and ask him to facilitate a conversation. Option 3. Call him directly. She eliminated the first two within 20 minutes. The letter was the easiest option. It was also, she knew, the option that served her discomfort rather than his dignity. A letter was something you sent when you wanted to discharge an obligation without risking an encounter. She had discharged enough obligations that way to know what it felt like. Calvin as intermediary was the same thing in different clothes. She'd be making him carry what she should carry herself. She looked up David Marsh's contact information in the donor file. She called. He answered on the fourth ring. Background noise, a job site. She could hear it. The percussion of construction work, voices at a distance, the specific quality of outdoor acoustics. David Marsh. Mr. Marsh, she said. This is Patricia Wren. I'm the CEO of the Hendricks Center. I'm sorry to call you directly. I got your number from our donor records. A pause. The background noise didn't go away, but it receded slightly as though he'd moved. Dr. Wren, he said. Not yes? Not what can I do for you? Just her name, with no particular inflection. An acknowledgement that he knew who she was. I'm calling because something happened last week that I need to speak with you about, she said. I believe you were in our lobby on Thursday morning with your son. A pause. Sam, he said. Yes, she stopped. She had prepared what to say. None of it seemed adequate now. I was crossing the lobby and I made a comment to a colleague about... She stopped again. She could have said about what I saw. She could have said about your appearance. She could have said a dozen things that were technically accurate and also evasive. She said, about your shoes. I made a joke about your shoes, and I'm told it was audible. I'm calling because it was wrong and I'm sorry. Silence, not hostile. Just, quiet. The quality of quiet of a man who doesn't fill spaces unnecessarily. I see, he said finally. I didn't know who you were, she said. And I want to be honest with you, that doesn't make it all right. It would have been wrong regardless. Another pause. That's a more self-aware acknowledgement than I usually get, he said. She blinked. You usually, not here, he said. In general. People usually explain the context when they apologize. Why they were distracted, why they weren't thinking, how they didn't mean it the way it came out. A pause. You didn't do that. I thought about it, she said honestly. I know, he said. I could tell from the pause. She sat with that. I'd like to meet with you in person, she said, if you're willing. A long pause. My son has an appointment next Wednesday, he said. I usually go to the third-floor waiting room while he's with Dr. Okafor if you wanted to stop by. I can do that, she said. All right, he said. He hung up. She set down the phone. She sat in her office looking at the donor wall through the window. She thought that the man she had just spoken to was one of the more interesting people she had talked to in a long time. The third-floor waiting room was designed for parents. This was a deliberate choice in the building's design. The pediatric treatment rooms were for children, with everything that implied, and there needed to be a space where the parents could be, which was different from a space where they merely waited. The waiting room had real chairs, not plastic ones, a window that showed sky, a bookshelf with books that were actually worth reading, and a sign that said, please take one if you need it. A small table with coffee equipment that worked. It was, in the way of the building's lobby. Designed by someone who understood that the hardest part of being in a children's medical facility was often not being the child. David was in the chair by the window when she came in. He was reading. A worn paperback, she couldn't see the title. He looked up when she entered, clocked her, and set the book face down on the arm of the chair in the way of someone marking a place without needing a bookmark. He looked, she thought, like what he was. A man in his 50s who worked with his hands and spent a lot of time outdoors and had been carrying something heavy for a few years in a way that had settled into his posture as steadiness rather than weight. He was wearing different boots. She noticed this and felt something she couldn't immediately name. She sat in the chair across from him. New boots, she said, because it was the only honest thing to open with. He looked at her for a moment. My son informed me, he said, that they were unprofessional. She blinked. Sam said that? He said. David paused, and something moved briefly in his face, a suppressed version of a smile. He said, and I'm quoting, Dad, your shoe has a mouth. That's fine at home, but maybe not at Sam's hospital. She looked at him. He calls it Sam's hospital, she said. He's been coming here since he was 5, David said. He considers it partly his. A pause. He's not wrong. She held that. No, she said quietly. He's not. She had prepared, for this meeting, an apology and a question. The apology she gave first, the full version, not the phone version, which had been honest, but shorter than what the moment required. She told him what she'd seen, what she'd thought, what she'd said, and what she understood about all three. She did not explain away any of it. He listened the way she'd already learned he listened. Completely, without interrupting, without performing a response before she'd finished. When she was done, he said, I appreciate that. Not it's okay. Not I forgive you. Just, I appreciate it. I want to ask you something, she said. And you don't have to answer. Ask, why the anonymity? You've been bringing Sam here for 18 months. You gave more to this building than any single donor. You've been sitting in this waiting room for a year and a half. Why didn't you ever say anything? He looked at the window. What would I have said? He said, something. Introduced yourself, let the staff know. And then what? He said, they'd treat Sam differently. They'd treat me differently. Every appointment would have a weight attached to it that the appointment doesn't need. He paused. Sam doesn't need to come to a hospital where the staff are managing their awareness of his father's donation. He needs to come to a hospital where Dr. Okafor is thinking about his joints. She absorbed that. And in the lobby? She said, you heard what I said. I could have said something, he agreed. Why didn't you? He looked at her. Because it wasn't necessary, he said. You were going to find out, or you weren't. Either way, the building was doing what it was built to do. A pause. Sam's doing well. The program is good. Dr. Okafor is. She's exceptional. That's what the gift was for. Not for me to be treated well in the lobby. She looked at him. You're more generous than I deserve, she said. No, he said. I'm practical. Grudges take energy. I have a 7-year-old in a contracting business. I don't have energy to spare. This time, the thing in his face was less suppressed. She smiled. Tell me about Eleanor, she said. He was quiet for a moment. You read the donor record. Yes, she was. He stopped. He started again. She was an artist. She did large-scale installations, murals, mosaics. She did the lobby installation in a building I renovated in 2009. That's how we met. The mural in our lobby, Patricia said slowly. The east wall. Was that? He looked at her. No, he said. She died before the building was designed. A pause. But I told the architects about her, he said quietly. About the kind of work she made. About what she believed a public space in a children's hospital should feel like. He paused. The brief I gave them had her fingerprints on it, even if her hands weren't. Patricia looked at the window. She thought about the lobby mural. The warm colors. The children in various states of becoming. She thought about a woman she had never met. She sounds extraordinary, she said. She was the most attentive person I ever knew, he said. She noticed everything. Not to use it, just because other people's details seemed genuinely worth knowing. A pause. She would have laughed about the boots, honestly. She had strong opinions about my relationship with practical footwear. Patricia made a sound that was, unexpectedly, a laugh. He looked at her. Sorry, she said. Don't be, he said. It's nice to say something about her that makes someone laugh. He paused. People get careful around the subject, like they might break something. Does it get easier? She said. He was quiet for a moment. No, he said. But you get better at living with it. She looked at him. That's something my father used to say, she said. Smart man. He was, she said. He died when I was in residency. A pause. Then you know, David said. Yes, she said. I know. They sat in the quiet of the waiting room. Outside the window, the Indianapolis sky in November held the specific white gray of Midwest winter trying to arrive. Dr. Okafor's appointment ran 90 minutes. When Sam came out into the waiting room, he was carrying a small plastic ankylosaur and wearing the expression of a child who has done something required and is ready to be done with it and get to the next thing. He saw his father. He saw the woman sitting across from his father. He looked at her with the frank, unfiltered assessment of a 7-year-old who hasn't yet learned to disguise his evaluation process. "You're the hospital boss," he said. Patricia looked at David. David looked at the middle distance with the expression of a parent who has decided the correct response to their child's accuracy is plausible deniability. "I am," Patricia said to Sam. "My name is Doctor." "Wren, like the bird?" Sam said. "Yes, wrens are small," Sam said, "but really loud. My dad has a book about birds." "That's true," Patricia said, "about the loud part." Sam considered her for a moment. "The T-Rex in the lobby mural has the wrong arms," he said. "Someone should fix it." "Sam," David said. "It should be a constructive note," Sam said, the sentence landing with the precision of a child repeating something he'd been told. He looked at Patricia. "We were going to leave one. We forgot." "I'll pass it on," Patricia said. "Really?" "Really," she said. "I'll tell the artist. She might appreciate it." Sam looked at the ankylosaur in his hand. "Okay," he said. He looked at his father. "Can we get lunch?" "Yes," David said. He stood, gathered Sam's coat, looked at Patricia. "Thank you," she said. He nodded once. "Dr. Wren," Sam said. She looked at him. "Your building is good," he said. "I've been to a lot of doctors. This one is the best one." He put on his coat and took his father's hand. They walked to the elevator. Patricia sat alone in the waiting room for a few minutes after they left. She looked at the window, the November sky, the room that someone had designed to be a place where parents could breathe. She thought about the lobby mural, the brief with Eleanor's fingerprints on it, the program that was keeping a 7-year-old's joints healthy enough to argue about dinosaur arms, the name on the wall that she'd walked past every day for 2 years. She had a building to run. She went back to her office. She went back differently. In part 4, David's full story, what it took to raise Sam alone, what Eleanor made him promise, and the year the contracting business nearly went under while he was keeping it. She had asked him, in the last months, not to stop working. Not because they needed the money, they had planned carefully, and there was enough. But because Eleanor Marsh had known her husband in a way that most people never know another person, and what she knew was this: David Marsh without work to do was David Marsh with nowhere to put his hands. And David Marsh with nowhere to put his hands was a man who would spend every waking hour in his grief and never come out. "Keep building things," she said. He had promised. He had also promised, this one she hadn't asked for, but she'd heard him make it in the way you make promises in a hospital room when the person you're promising can't be present for the conversation, that Sam would be all right. That whatever it took, Sam would have what he needed. The treatment. The care. The program that could give a child with his condition the chance to grow up and run and argue about dinosaur arms. He had kept that promise with $3.2 million. He had kept the other one with his hands. This is the story of the year he did both at once, and what it cost him, and how he got through it. Eleanor died in February. By April, David was back on job sites. This was not heroism. This was Eleanor's prescription, and he'd filled it. He went to job sites, and he looked at structures, and he solved problems. And somewhere in the machinery of that, the daily practice of seeing what was wrong and making it right, the grief had enough to occupy it that it didn't swallow him whole. Sam was 4 years old. Preschool, 3 days a week. A neighbor named Rose, who'd been their babysitter for 2 years, and who had, in the months after Eleanor died, shifted from babysitter to something closer to a village elder. Present, steady, opinionated in the specific way of a 72-year-old woman who had decided this family was her business now. David had not asked for this. He had accepted it the way he accepted most things he couldn't build, quietly, with gratitude that came out sideways rather than front on. In June of 2021, Sam's knees started swelling. It had started subtly. Sam had begun favoring his right leg on stairs. David had noticed it the way he noticed everything, without announcing the noticing, and had made an appointment with the pediatrician. The pediatrician had referred to a rheumatologist. The rheumatologist had done blood work and imaging and had sat across from David in a small office and explained what juvenile idiopathic arthritis was, what it wasn't, what it meant for a 4-year-old, and what the next steps were. David had asked 12 questions. All of them were good questions. The rheumatologist, a tired, competent man at a practice that was understaffed and overscheduled, had answered them carefully and then said, "You should know about a facility they're building on the north side. It's going to have one of the best pediatric rheumatology programs in the region when it opens." He had given David the Hendricks Center's website. David had gone home and read everything on it. He had then found the capital campaign materials. He had read those too. He had sat at the kitchen table for a long time after Sam was in bed. He had thought about Eleanor and what she'd wanted for Sam, and what he had that could make what she'd wanted real. He had called the development director the next morning. Calvin Bright had been expecting, when the call came in, a moderate donor inquiry. Someone interested in giving $25,000, maybe $50,000 if the conversation went well. An interested community member. He had not been expecting David Marsh. The conversation had been brisk and specific. David had introduced himself. He'd said he had a son recently diagnosed with juvenile idiopathic arthritis, and that he'd been told the center would have a strong rheumatology program. He'd asked 3 questions about the program's scope and the funding model. Calvin had answered all 3. Then David had said, "I'm prepared to make a significant gift. I want it designated for the rheumatology program, the family support services, and a scholarship fund for families who need help with the ancillary costs of long-term specialty care." Calvin had been quiet for a moment. "What level are we talking about?" he'd asked carefully. $3.2 million, David said. The phone was quiet. "Mr. Marsh," Calvin said. "It's going to be anonymous," David said. "My name in the donor wall. The family name. In memory of my wife. Nothing else. No wing naming. No fellowship. No recognition event." "Of course," Calvin said. "We can certainly... $3.2 million. Is there a problem?" "No," Calvin said. "No problem. I just want to make sure I understand what you're offering." "I'm not offering," David said. "I'm giving. If the program is what the materials say it is." "It is," Calvin said. "I can set up a site visit." "That would be helpful," David said. He had done the site visit. He had walked the partially built facility, still under construction in the fall of 2021, with Calvin and the lead architect. He had asked very specific questions about the rheumatology clinic's layout and the family waiting areas and the parking situation for families coming for long-term appointments. The architect, who knew buildings, had watched David Marsh move through the unfinished structure with the ease of someone who understood what he was looking at. "Are you in construction?" the architect had asked. "Yes," David said. "What kind?" "Commercial renovation," David said. "Historic properties mostly." The architect had looked at him. "The lobby design," he said. "The brief we were given, it had this description of an artist's philosophy about public space. Very specific. I've never had a client describe that to us so clearly." David had been quiet. "It was my wife's philosophy," he said. The architect had not said anything else. The gift had been finalized in December of 2021. Here is the thing about giving $3.2 million when you're a sole proprietor contractor with 4 employees and a 4-year-old son. It is a lot of money. He had it. The property sale, the savings, the math worked. He had done the math many times, including with his accountant and his attorney, and the math worked. But the math working and the business continuing to work were 2 different problems. 2022 had been a hard year. The property market had done things that nobody had predicted in quite the way they happened. 2 of his longer-term clients had delayed major renovation projects. A commercial building in Broad Ripple, a project he'd been counting on for the spring, had been put on hold when the building's owner ran into financing issues. He had gone 3 months in the spring of 2022 without a significant contract. He had not touched the gift. That money was gone, as it was meant to be. It had been transferred, deposited, put to its intended use. What he had was a business with 4 employees, a son in specialist care, and 3 months of carrying costs with no corresponding income. He had managed it the way he managed everything, methodically, without drama, with the specific stoicism of a man who had learned from his father that the difference between a problem and a crisis was usually perspective and time. He'd taken on smaller jobs, things he'd have ordinarily passed to other contractors. A bathroom renovation here, a porch repair there, the kind of work that was beneath his skill level and paid accordingly. He'd done it without complaint. He'd kept all 4 employees. He had not furloughed anyone. He had paid them from the reserve he'd built precisely for situations like this, the reserve he'd been building for 15 years. That Eleanor had teased him about because she felt he was too cautious, and that he had maintained anyway, because his father had told him that the only thing worse than going under was taking people with you. By fall of 2022, the business was moving again. By spring of 2023, it was better than before. He had replaced the boots in his daughter. No, he had replaced them for Sam's sake. Sam had called them unprofessional, and that was a judgment worth taking seriously, coming from a 7-year-old with strong opinions about dinosaurs and public art. He had replaced them the week after the Wednesday appointment at the Hendricks Center. He had not replaced them before. The honest reason, which he'd acknowledged to himself but not said aloud, the boots were the last pair he'd owned when Eleanor was alive. He'd bought them in the fall of 2020. She had seen him wear them. That was irrational. He knew it was irrational. He'd replaced them anyway, the week after Sam told him they had a mouth. Some things you let your 7-year-old solve for you. Sam Marsh at 7 knew several things about his father. He knew his father worked on buildings. He knew his father was good at it, because once a man at a hardware store had recognized his father and said, "You're the one who did the Romanesque revival on Meridian, aren't you?" And his father had said yes, and the man had said it was the best work he'd seen in Indianapolis in 20 years, which Sam had stored as information. He knew his father cooked pasta on Sunday nights, and that it was the best pasta Sam had ever tasted, which was not a limited sample because he had tasted many pastas. He knew his father cried sometimes, at night, when he thought Sam was asleep. Sam had heard it 3 times. He had not said anything, because his father didn't say anything when Sam cried at night. And this arrangement seemed right. He knew his father kept a photograph of his mother on the bedside table. Not the formal one from their wedding, a candid, her laughing at something outside the frame, in the specific way of someone who finds things genuinely funny. He knew, in the way that children know things they haven't been told, that his father had done something for the hospital. He didn't know the specifics. But he knew the way his father moved through the building, careful, present, with the quality of someone for whom a place has meaning, and he had understood, in the wordless way of 7-year-olds, that this was different from how his father moved through other places. He had not asked about it. When he was ready to know, he would ask. His father would tell him. In Part 5, what changes at the Hendricks Center after Patricia meets David, what she does about the donor wall, and the morning she shows up at a job site in Indianapolis that she had no reason to know about. She had no reason to be there. The building was a 1920s commercial property in the Fountain Square neighborhood, a 4-story brick structure that had been a furniture manufacturer's showroom for 60 years and had spent the last 15 in varying states of disuse and partial renovation. She was not a contractor. She was not an investor. She had no professional connection to the building or to Fountain Square or to any of the 8 people currently working on the first floor. She was there because David Marsh was there, and she had something to say that needed to be said outside the context of her building. That was the only reason. Whether it was a good enough reason was something she'd been arguing with herself about for the 40-minute drive. She parked on the street and sat in the car for a moment. Then she got out and walked to the entrance. After the Wednesday appointment, 3 weeks ago, several things had changed. The first change was small and visible. The east wall mural had been reviewed. Patricia had, as promised, reached out to the artist. The artist, a woman in her 50s named Dolores, who had done the installation commission as a labor of love, had received the T-Rex note with an expression of such genuine delight that the development assistant who delivered it had sent Patricia a photograph of her face. The T-Rex was being corrected. Dolores had laughed about it for 10 minutes and then gotten out her brushes. The second change was larger and less visible. Patricia had started a practice she had not had before. Every morning, before the building filled up, she walked through it. Not a tour, she'd done tours. This was different. She walked slowly. She went to the waiting rooms and the consultation areas and the break rooms and the places where families sat for long appointments and where staff ate lunch. She read the faces of the people she passed. She asked questions she hadn't been asking. She had learned things in 3 weeks that she'd missed in 2 years. A family from rural Indiana driving 4 hours each way for biweekly appointments who had been sleeping in their car because the Family Support Services hotel stipend didn't cover their situation. A gap in the policy language that had been a real gap for real people for a year. Fixed in 72 hours. A scheduling system for the oncology wing that was adding 45 minutes of unnecessary wait time to every appointment because of a software incompatibility that the IT team had flagged 5 months ago and that had been in the administrative queue since September. Fixed in a week. 3 nurses in the rheumatology program, the program David's gift had built, who had been covering a shift gap for 6 months without overtime compensation because of a payroll categorization error. Fixed when she found out, which was 2 weeks after she started walking the building. None of these were small things. None of them had required a strategic initiative or a board presentation or a consultant's report. They had required someone walking through the building and paying attention. She had been paying attention. She had also been thinking about David Marsh, which was a different kind of attention, and one she hadn't quite decided what to do with. She had a professional reason and a real reason. The professional reason was that the Hendricks Center was beginning a modest capital project, an expansion of the Family Support Services suite on the 2nd floor, and was conducting a competitive process for the renovation contract. Calvin had suggested Marsh Contracting as one of the firms to include in the RIF outreach. This was a legitimate reason. It was also, she acknowledged to herself on the 40-minute drive, not why she was going to a job site in person on a Tuesday morning instead of sending the RFP through normal channels. The real reason was more complicated. She had thought about the conversation in the waiting room many times in 3 weeks. Not the apology part. She'd discharged that, and it was done. The other part. The part where he'd talked about Eleanor and the lobby brief and the building with her fingerprints on it. The part where he'd said she would have laughed about the boots. She had thought about a man who had given more than $3 million to a building without telling anyone, who wore work boots to his son's medical appointments because he had a job site afterward, who had heard a comment in the lobby and responded by saying nothing and walking to the elevator. She had thought about what kind of person does all of that. She had concluded it was the kind of person worth knowing better. Whether that was a professional conclusion or a personal one was the thing she was arguing with herself about in the car. The Fountain Square building was in the middle phase of renovation, the part where the bones were exposed, and the intent was visible, but the finish was still somewhere in the future. She found David on the 2nd floor. He was in conversation with one of his crew, a stocky man in his 40s who had a level in one hand and a clipboard in the other, and an expression of focused disagreement about something on the wall. They were arguing, quietly in the specific shorthand of people who have worked together long enough that the argument is really a negotiation between 2 valid technical positions. She stood in the stairwell entrance until the conversation resolved. The stocky man made a mark on the clipboard with the specific energy of someone conceding a point they weren't fully convinced by, and David looked up and saw her. He was still for a moment. "Dr. Wren," he said. "I should have called first," she said. "No," he said. "It's all right." He looked at his crew briefly, a quick, unremarkable glance that communicated something she couldn't decode, and came toward her. "Come see what we're doing." He showed her the building the way she had learned, in the past 3 weeks, was the right way to show someone a building. Not the finished vision, but the current reality. What was here? What was wrong? What was being made right? The 2nd floor had good bones. The original Heartpine floors, where they survived, were exceptional. The window casements were intact. The load-bearing structure, despite 60 years of commercial use and 15 of neglect, was fundamentally sound. "Historic renovation," she said. "Yes. What's the challenge with this one?" "The mechanical systems are 3 different eras," he said. 1920s original, 1970s overlay, and a 1990s partial renovation that didn't account for the first 2. You can't treat any of them independently. It's all connected. How do you approach it? He looked at the wall where the crew had been working. You go slow, he said. You look at what's there before you decide what you're doing. Every older building has logic in it. Decisions made by the original builders that are still the right decisions, even if they look wrong by current standards. You have to understand the logic before you change anything. She thought about her own building. She thought about 2 years of walking through it without reading what it was telling her. That's good practice for anything, she said. He looked at her. Yes, he said. It is. She told him about the second-floor expansion project. He listened. He asked 3 questions: the scope, the timeline, and whether the design was fixed or whether there was flexibility in the specification. Why flexibility, she said. Because second-floor expansions in medical buildings usually have acoustic requirements that get added late in the design phase, he said. If the spec is fixed before the acoustic consultant signs off, you almost always end up with change orders. She looked at him. Our architect did mention acoustic considerations, she said. She said we'd need to revisit the wall spec. That's going to be a change order if the bid is already out, he said. The bid isn't out yet, she said. We're still in RFP development. Then put the acoustic spec in the RFP, he said. It's not complicated, but it has to be in the original document. She made a note on her phone. You just saved us a change order. Maybe, he said. Depends on the architect. I'll call her today, she said. He looked at her for a moment. Is the RFP why you came? He said. She put her phone in her pocket. No, she said honestly. He waited. I wanted to see what you build, she said. I've been thinking about what you said, about older buildings, about understanding the logic before you change anything. She paused. I've been trying to apply it. To the Hendricks Center? To the way I run it, she said. I've been walking the building in the mornings. I've been finding things I missed. Such as, she told him, the family in the car, the scheduling incompatibility, the nurses and the payroll error. He listened the way he always listened. When she finished, he said, How long had those been going on? Months, she said. In 2 cases, close to a year. They weren't secrets. No, she said. They were there. I just wasn't, she stopped. Looking, he said. Looking at the right level, she said. I was looking at the building from the top, from the strategy. I wasn't in it. He was quiet. Eleanor used to say something about art, he said, about what made public art work versus what made it just decoration. She said decoration is about the building. Art is about the people in the building. You have to understand the people first, or you're just putting colors on a wall. She looked at him. You think about her constantly, she said. Every day, he said. It gets easier to be functional about it. It doesn't get less. A pause. She would have liked the lobby mural, he said. She'd have had the same note about the T-Rex arms. And yet, you put it in the brief anyway. The arms? He looked at her. The T-Rex, she said. He was quiet for a moment. I didn't put the T-Rex in the brief, he said. The artist added it. It's her interpretation. But she got the arms wrong. She got the spirit right, he said. That's what Eleanor would have cared about. Patricia thought about that. She thought about the lobby, the children running in the mural, the warm colors, the specific quality of that space, the way it had managed from the first day to do both things a children's hospital lobby was supposed to do. She did, Patricia said. She absolutely got the spirit right. They were standing at the second-floor windows looking out at Fountain Square, the neighborhood going about its morning, the specific texture of a city block that had been many things and was currently becoming something new. Can I ask you something personal? She said. You've been asking me personal things since the first phone call, he said. I don't seem to mind. Why contracting? She said. You're clearly the way you understand buildings, the way you think about structures. You could have gone further with that professionally. Architecture, engineering. He was quiet for a moment. My father was a carpenter, he said. He made things with his hands. He taught me. It was never separate from who I was. School, licensing, the business, all of it was built on top of what he taught me. He paused. Architecture would have moved me away from the work. I didn't want to move away from it. You wanted to stay in the building. I wanted to stay in the building, he said. She thought about her own trajectory. Medicine to administration. The move up and away from the clinical work, which had been the right move for the institution and had cost her something she was only beginning to understand the shape of. I think I went too far from the building, she said. He looked at her. You found your way back, he said. In 3 weeks, she said. I missed 2 years. You found your way back, he said again. Steady, not dismissive of the 2 years, but not adding to their weight either. She looked at him. She thought about Eleanor and the lobby brief and the bones of this 1920s building, and a 7-year-old with strong opinions about dinosaur anatomy. I'd like to send you the riff, she said. All right. And I'd like... She stopped. He waited. I'd like to have dinner, she said. Not as a donor conversation, not as a contractor conversation, a pause. Just as people. He was quiet for a moment. She watched him think about it. Not anxiously, she wasn't the anxious kind. Just honestly. He said, Sam has his next appointment in 6 weeks. I know the schedule, she said. If I pick him up from school on the Friday before, he said, he usually wants pasta. I make it on Sundays, but I'll make an exception. She looked at him. Is that an invitation to dinner at your house? Sam would like to tell you about the T-Rex correction in person, he said. He's been following it closely. She smiled. I'll bring dessert, she said. He likes anything chocolate, David said. He gets that from his mother. In part 6, the dinner. What Sam says that neither of them expected. The morning Patricia walks the donor wall one final time and reads all 412 names. And the conversation that happens in the lobby. The one that closes what the lobby opened. She read the donor wall one more time on the morning of the Friday dinner. All 412 names. Not the way she'd read it after Calvin told her about David, with the specific focused urgency of someone absorbing a shock. This time slowly. The way you read something when you want to understand it rather than just know it. She had been director of this facility for 2 years. She had walked past this wall 10,000 times. She had never understood what it was until now. It was not a list of transactions. It was not a monument to wealth or generosity or institutional gratitude. It was 412 reasons. 412 people who had looked at this building and decided it mattered enough to be part of. Not as clients, not as patients, not as staff, but as something older and simpler. People who believed in a thing and put something of themselves into making it real. She read them all. She stopped at the top tier. David A. Marsh, in memory of Eleanor Marsh. She stood there for a while. Then she went about her day. She had a dinner to prepare for. She had brought chocolate lava cake from a bakery on Mass Ave. 2 of them, because she'd looked at Sam's face when she'd decided one and felt instinctively that one was insufficient. The house was in Bexley, a quiet street, older homes, mature trees bare now in late November. The house itself was clearly the work of a man who knew what he was doing. The porch railing replaced with something better. The front steps refinished. The windows probably not original, but fitted so well they looked it. She rang the bell. Sam answered the door. He was wearing a T-shirt with a dinosaur skeleton on it and holding the ankylosaur from his last appointment. You brought chocolate, he said, looking at the box. 2, she said. He considered this. Okay, he said, and stepped back to let her in. The pasta was, as advertised, exceptional. She said so, and David received it with the specific minimalism of someone who has been complimented on a skill enough times to not need to perform modesty about it. My mother taught me, he said. Her mother taught her. It goes back. Dad's from an Italian family? Sam said to Patricia, as if clarifying for a newcomer. Half, David said. Your grandmother would correct you. Half Italian from the pasta side, Sam said. The important half. Patricia looked at the boy. He had his father's quality of paying attention, the same steadiness, the same habit of watching before speaking. He also had something his father didn't quite have, a willingness to say the direct thing, with 7-year-old honesty, that David managed by implication. He was going to be something. Dr. Okafor told me about the T-Rex, Sam said. Did she? She said you passed on the note. She said Dolores, the artist, was excited about it. She was, Patricia said. She's been correcting it. She's going to fix the arms, and she's adding a small detail she said she always meant to add, but never got the commission time for. Sam looked at her. What detail? A nest, Patricia said. Some paleontologists think certain dinosaurs built nests and were attentive parents. She said she'd wanted to include that but felt it wasn't scientific enough. T-Rexes probably weren't like that, Sam said, but some of them were. The bird dinosaurs. She's doing one of the Maiasaura, Patricia said, in the corner of the mural. A mother in a nest. Sam was quiet. He looked at his ankylosaur. That's good, he said. Patricia looked at David. David was looking at his son. His expression was the one that photographs could capture, and that had no name, the one that meant exactly what it looked like, and nothing else. After dinner, while David was doing the dishes, he declined her offer to help, in the specific way of a man who processes things at the sink. Sam sat across from Patricia at the kitchen table. He was building something with a set of small magnetic tiles, a structure, roughly cubic, with modifications she couldn't interpret. Dr. Wren, he said, without looking up. Yes, my dad gave money to your building. She was very still. I figured it out, Sam said. He doesn't know I know. But I figured it out. She looked at the back of David's head at the sink. Why do you think he did it? She said carefully. Sam was quiet for a moment, still building. Because of my mom, he said. She wanted me to be okay. He wanted what she wanted. A pause. That's what my dad does. He figures out what the right thing is, and then he does it, even when it's hard. She held that. He doesn't talk about it, Sam said. No, she said. He doesn't talk about most of the things he does, Sam said. He just does them. He placed a tile on the structure. I've been watching him for a long time. She looked at this 7-year-old. You're going to be a lot like him, she said. Sam considered this seriously. I'm going to be like both of them, he said. My mom noticed things. My dad fixes things. He looked at her. I want to do both. At the sink, David had gone still. The water was still running. He had heard. Sam went to bed at 8:30. The process involved negotiations about the ankylosaur's sleeping arrangements, a conversation about whether the T-Rex in the mural would get the corrected arms or whether the whole mural would need to be repainted, and a final assessment of the chocolate lava cakes. 2 was the right number, Sam said. I thought so, Patricia said. Good math, he said, with the gravity of someone conferring a significant compliment. He went to bed. David and Patricia sat at the kitchen table with the remains of the chocolate lava cakes and the specific quiet of a house after a child goes to sleep. A quality of quiet that is not empty, but full. Occupied by everything the child contains. He knows, Patricia said. I know he knows, David said. I've known for about 6 months. And when he's ready to ask me about it, I'll tell him. He paused. He's not ready yet. He's still working out what he thinks about it. He thinks his mother wanted him to be okay, and you made sure she got that. David looked at the table. She did want that, he said. She talked about it, about the care, the access, whether it would be there for him in 10 years, 15 years, whether the programs would last. He paused. I wanted to give her the answer. Even though she couldn't hear it, she would have known, he said. She always knew when I'd done what I said I would. Patricia was quiet. He said your mother noticed things, she said. And you fix things. Yes, he wants to do both. David was quiet for a moment. Eleanor would have loved hearing that, he said. I think she already knows, Patricia said. He looked at her. It was an unusual thing to say, for her. Not her register, not her training, not the language of a clinician administrator who had built a career on measurable outcomes. She'd meant it anyway. He seemed to understand that. What did you think, he said, when you walked the donor wall? This morning? Yes. She thought about how to say it. I thought it was 412 reasons, she said. Not a list. Not a monument. Reasons, people who decided it mattered. And I've been running the building as a system, she said, as an operation. I've been making it efficient and I've been meeting the metrics and I've been missing. She stopped. The reasons, he said. The reasons, she said. He nodded slowly. Eleanor used to say, he said, That the difference between a building that feels right and one that just functions correctly is whether the people in it can tell they were thought about. The lobby, Patricia said. The lobby, he said. The waiting room on 3. The acoustic design and the rheumatology clinic. He paused. She was thought about in all of it. I made sure of that. She was, Patricia said. I can feel it. Now that I know how to look. He looked at her for a long time. You're different, he said, from the woman in the lobby. I know, she said. Not because of who I am, he said. You'd started changing before Calvin told you. I was moving too fast, she said. The lobby slowed me down. That's a generous interpretation of the lobby, he said. It's the accurate one, she said. I needed to be wrong about something. I'd been right about enough things that being wrong had become unfamiliar. She paused. You were the most instructive wrong I've made in years. He made a sound that was, quietly, a laugh. I'll put that on a plaque, he said. Don't, she said. You hate plaques. He looked at her. You're right, he said. I do. Marsh Contracting was awarded the second-floor expansion contract in January. It was not a foregone conclusion. There were 3 other bidders, 2 of whom had submitted stronger initial pricing. But the scope review had confirmed what David had said at the job site. The acoustic specification needed to be in the original document. His bid was the only one that had accounted for it correctly from the start. The project manager who reviewed the bids had written in her recommendation, Marsh proposal is the only one demonstrating full understanding of the acoustic integration requirements. Recommend award. Patricia had signed off. David had started in February. He was on site 2 days a week. Patricia, who now walked the building every morning, saw him regularly. Sometimes they talked. About the work, about Sam, about the building and what it told him, and what she was learning to hear. Sometimes they didn't talk. Sometimes they simply occupied the same building, which was something she had come to understand was its own kind of conversation. Calvin had noticed. He had not said anything to Patricia. He had said something to the development assistant, which was the same thing eventually. The development assistant had said, he gave $3 million. She laughed at his shoes. I think it's going to be fine. Calvin had agreed that it probably was. On a Tuesday morning in March, Patricia was crossing the lobby. Not hurrying. She didn't hurry through the lobby anymore. She moved through it the way you move through a space that you know and are present in. She passed the donor wall. She looked at it. Not stopped, not stared, but the way you look at something that has become part of your regular attention. David A. Marsh, in memory of Eleanor Marsh. She kept walking. She passed the east wall mural. The T-Rex was correct now. The arms were short, embarrassingly accurately short, and in the corner, where Dolores had added the Maiasaura, a mother dinosaur attended a nest with the specific quality of attention that the best illustrations of parental care have. Not performing, just present. Sam had come to see it last month. He had stood in front of it for a long time. He had said, finally, the arms are right. And then, after a long moment, I like the one in the corner. David had been beside him. He had looked at the Maiasaura for a long time without saying anything. Then he had nodded, once in the quiet way of someone receiving something they had needed. On the Tuesday morning in March, Patricia crossed the lobby and paused at the mural. She looked at the Maiasaura in the corner. A mother in a nest. Thought about. Built in. There, she kept walking. She had a building to run. She ran it differently now. Not perfectly, she would never claim perfect. She still moved too fast sometimes. She still, occasionally, looked at a surface before she looked at what was underneath it. She was human in the specific ways that humans are human, and there was no donor wall large enough to change that completely. But she walked the building in the mornings. She knew Marcus at the security desk by name. She knew the nurse in rheumatology who had been there since opening day and who had strong opinions about the cafeteria coffee and who was right. She knew which waiting room had the best light and which had a drafty window that needed looking at, and she had put it on the list. She knew the list. She was learning, slowly, to read the building honestly. It was showing her who they were. She was making sure they were worth it. She laughed at his shoes on a Thursday morning in November. She didn't mean to be cruel. She was moving too fast to see clearly. The lobby saw everything. The name on the wall saw everything. A 7-year-old boy with a dinosaur backpack and strong opinions about paleontological accuracy saw everything. And a man with worn boots stood up, picked up his son's backpack, and walked to the elevator. He said nothing, because there was nothing to say. The building was doing what it was built to do. The program was doing what it was built to do. His son was getting the care that Eleanor had wanted him to have. That was the whole promise. That was the whole gift. That was the whole point of walking into a building that had his wife's fingerprints on it and sitting in a waiting room that had been designed by someone who understood that the hardest part of being in a children's hospital was often not being the child. He had made a promise in a hospital room to a woman who loved T-Rex arms and lobby tape measures and children in spaces where they felt thought about. The building stood. The program ran. The name was on the wall. He had kept his promise. She had needed the lobby that day. Not him. Her. She just didn't know it until Monday morning, when Calvin closed the door and slid the donor acknowledgement across her desk, and the name she'd been walking past for 2 years finally landed where it was always meant to land. In the right place. At the right time. With the full weight of what it meant. She had laughed at his shoes. She had found his name on the wall. She had found her way back into the building. Some corrections take a while. The important ones are worth making. The end.